And I think
All right.
right.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, I lost my screen. Okay, there I am.
There I am.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Advocacy Days 2024. We are here today to talk about inclusive education. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Tanika Aiden. I work for PAVE. I come to you from DuPont, and I am the mom to a 10-year-old little boy who is on the autism spectrum. Well, he's a big boy, almost bigger than me. So thank you for joining us today. I am one of your co-hosts. For my visual description, I am an African-American woman. I have my hairs in a big fro. I'm wearing a blue and white striped top. I'm sitting in a chair wearing glasses, and my background screen is blurred out. And my pronouns are she and her. And joining me today, as always, the wonderful Taylor. Hi, Taylor. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good, Tanika. Thank you. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I am Taylor Crisp. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Spokane County, and I'm in District 9 for my legislative district. I am employed at the ARC of Spokane, and I am also a parent of a child with an intellectual and developmental disability. And for my visual description, I have a blurred background. My hair is braided, and I'm wearing a gray sweater. And I am happy to be co-hosting with Tanika as always, and here with you guys today. Um, and yeah, before we get moving along, I just want to remind others to select your interpretation on the globe icon on the bottom of your screen here to English or Spanish. If you could introduce yourself, your organization, or legislative district in the chat, so we know who you are. And when we have speakers speaking, please stay muted. And if you are speaking, speak at a pace for the interpreters to be able to communicate with others that need that interpretation accessibility. And so we're going to have Ramona Hattendorf, our lovely Ramona from the ARC of King County. Most of us know her, to go do the overview of our topics on this education piece.
Good morning, Ramona.
Sorry, I couldn't get to my unmute on my computer. Anyways, I'm Ramona Hattendorf. I'm so happy to be here. I am the Director of Public Policy and Civic Engagement at the ARC of King County. My pronouns are she, her. I am from Seattle. I am in the 36th Legislative District, so sort of the heart of Seattle. And my physical description, I am a lady in her 50s. I have long, light, I don't know, tannish color hair, and I have dark eyes. And I'm here to talk to you today about inclusion and inclusive learning. And something that I like to do is a lot of times when people are coming from, I have a child with a disability, they're immediately go into the special education services and the IEP process and what's going to be a good program for my child. But I'd like to back up a little bit, because when you're talking about inclusion, you really need to think about the general education, because inclusion is about being part of the general education setting. So you want to make sure that general education setting is resourced and equipped to handle you and your child. Next slide. All right, so some of the supports you might want to look at. So if you're a parent, or you're coming into it, or maybe if you're an older person with a disability and you're still in the school system, but what are some of the things you might want to look at? And just like looking around the school environment, are children with families with disabilities, are they welcomed into the community? Like when they have their opening day, welcome ceremonies, or if they have any sort of PTA meetings or school meetings, it's like, are families with disabilities really included in that? Are the programs that they use included in school information and highlights? Are their staff, are they intentional in how they support what I call diverse students. And it might be a student with a disability. It could be a student who speaks different language, who is a recent immigrant. There's all kinds of different ways that you can be diverse. And all that is part of inclusion. It's not just disability, it's inclusion of everyone who has some sort of diversity. And then another consideration, does the school district help educators be flexible and responsive? Because that's ultimately what it gets down to is, are they able to meet you where you are? And how is the school and how is the school district structured to support that? Is staff able to plan for diversity? Do they have staff planning time set aside? Is it regular? Are the special education team always able to communicate with the general ed classroom teachers, things like that? And then from the student perspective, do they even feel membership and belonging? Do they really feel that I am a part of the school community, not just a particular class they might be in, but do I see myself in the school community? Do I feel like I belong here? Do I feel like the other people in the school building feel that I belong here? And then from a more parent observation point, you might be looking at, are everybody, is everybody participating? Are they achieving? So these are just some of the sort of indicators you might want to look at for an inclusive setting. Next slide. So when I talk about inclusion, I do a class called the Inclusion Academy, and we go into all kinds of things around inclusion and education. But I like to set back and first define what I mean by inclusion, because different people, it means different things to different people. This graphic on the screen right now is actually taken from the United Nations, and there's different versions of this floating around on the internet, so you might have seen something. But what it does is it really illustrates the spectrum from exclusion to inclusion. And the thing that I always like to point out is that integration is non-inclusion. So on this graphic, we start at the upper left corner with exclusion. So that's, you're not even a part of the education system. You're denied. So somebody is expelled, they're excluded. Something like that. If they're continually removed from school, they're really excluded from learning. And then you have a segregated setting, and a segregated setting would be you're part of the school, but you are only in a separate classroom. Or maybe you're a part of the school system, but you're in a separate school within that school system, only for disabilities. So that's, you're given access to education, but you are kept separate. And then they have integration. And this is the distinction I like to make, because a lot of people think, oh, inclusion is integration. And then people who are really proponents who really like to talk about inclusion say, no, what we're talking about is a little different. So integration is everybody comes in, but you aren't necessarily given the supports that you really need. And that mainstream environment doesn't necessarily change to make sure that it can welcome and it can support people with different diversities. So integrated works for people who can really adjust to the mainstream environment. And it's kind of on the individual to be able to do that. And we know that for a lot of kids, not just kids with disabilities, for a lot of kids, it doesn't really work. And they get pushed to the margins. And you start to see like higher dropout rates. You see very similar profile on who's not finishing school, who's being dropped out of school, who's facing what they call exclusionary discipline. So that would be suspension, expulsion, who's isolated and restrained more often. You really see some very common things. And so we can see that just letting everyone into the building doesn't necessarily mean it's an inclusive space. So when we get to inclusion, that's when we're talking about changing that environment, making sure that, it is welcoming, making sure that teachers are able to respond to the student, planning, anticipating the fact that, not all of our students are the same. Students have different needs, and we need to make sure that we're planning a space that's welcoming to all of our students with all of their different needs. So when I talk about inclusion, I'm really talking about having a space and having a school and having a community that is really intentional. And that means, and this is what makes it hard for advocates, because that means that it's not on the individual entirely to adjust. That means that the people in that school building, they might have to change. They might have to rethink about how they structure, their curriculum or how they do their school schedule. It kind of means the system has to change. And we've got a great guest who will be able to talk later about what school districts in the state are doing that. But so for me, inclusion is intentional, and it means everyone else, they're in it, and they got to be willing to change and adapt as well. So next slide. So did you know, and I always like to point this out because people who are in this space and advocates, we know this, but a lot of people don't necessarily know that. Like, did you know that there's both a strong legal foundation for inclusion, and also that there's just so much research that says that inclusion is really better. It's better academically, it's better for social and emotional learning, and it's not just better for students with disabilities, it's better for all students. And it's not just some students with disabilities. Students with really more significant disabilities also do better in inclusive settings. Now, they need supports. We're not suggesting that you don't have your supports and services and all that. But if you have your supports pushed in and you're with your peers and you're in that general education setting, then the research actually backs it up and says that students are doing really well when they are supported in that environment. As for the strong legal foundation, I always try to point out, yes, there's the Individuals with Disabilities Act. That's called IDEA, and that's the one that sets up, IEP and that whole process. But that is not the only legal protection out there for people with disabilities. In fact, I kind of like to think of IDEA, that's more of a grant program. Basically, the federal government gives states and schools money for educating students with disabilities if they follow these rules. And those rules are all the IDEA, IEP and what has to go into it, all that stuff. The foundational, like you have a right to education, is really in what's called Section 504, and the long name for that is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And that applies not just with schools, that applies with anything that gets federal funding. So healthcare, you see this just really in all kinds of programs in early learning. You obviously see this in schools. So that's Section 504, and that's with everything. And then also, and sometimes people don't realize this, but the Americans with Disability Act, specifically Title II or Section 2, and that's the one that covers local and state government. And the ADA says that local and state government, you can't discriminate. You need to give them equal access to the most integrated setting. I don't have the exact legal words in front of me, but it's similar to IDEA where it's equal access in the most integrated setting appropriate. But there's also another little asterisk that I like to remind people about, and that's an equal opportunity. So, so this kind of plays into, you're not just given access, you have an equal opportunity to whatever educational opportunity and growth that someone without a disability would have. So to me, that's a big thing. It's not just equal access. So that is critical. It's an equal opportunity to benefit, and that's critical. And next slide. And so these are just a couple of quotes. And on the links, there's some resources. This one, Building a Culture of Inclusion for Individuals with Disabilities, begins at birth in early childhood programs and continues into schools, communities, and places of employment. Inclusion in early childhood programs can set a trajectory for inclusion across the lifespan. This was taken from a policy statement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and U.S. Department of Education. It was updated. The original policy statement in support of inclusive early learning came out, I think, in 2015. It was just updated in November. And this gives all kinds of information. When I talked about the research, it lays out the research basis for inclusion. I talk about the legal foundation for inclusion, it lays out the legal foundation of inclusion. And it also goes into all kinds of strategies that people can use. So strategies for, state strategies for local school districts, policy strategies. It's really a great resource. But ultimately, what is important about this is that everyone should know that you're supposed to have access to inclusive preschool. It shouldn't be the default is you are in a segregated preschool program. It should be an inclusive preschool program. Next slide. This quote comes from our state, and Cassie Martin is here, so she'll be able to like talk more about this. But we have something called the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project, and this launched, oh goodness, a few years now. And it really, I give the state kudos. It really said, you know what? We have really low inclusion rates, and we do. We have really low inclusion rates, but they're getting a lot better. And so they started this inclusionary practices program to set up pilots and to help people understand how they can incorporate inclusionary practices into our schools and how they can become inclusive schools. So all that list, like those 6 things in the beginning, like how in the world do I get my school that's not doing this to do that? It kind of addresses that sort of area. There's all kinds of really great resources on this website. And again, it's really saying that, you know, we all need supports in different way, regardless of your special education status. You need to be able to get those resources, and you need to be able to thrive in the general education classroom alongside your peers. So you shouldn't have to be, in most cases, I think probably in nearly all cases, I would argue, you shouldn't have to be, you know, in a separate place to get those services. You should be able to get those services in the main setting. So again, this link will take you to the site, and there's a lot of information on that site and a lot of resources, including something I like called myths and facts. And I'll put those into the chat box, and it really kind of breaks down like why people seem to think that we can't do inclusion, especially sometimes from the educator standpoint. It puts all that. So I'll put that in the chat. And that is my overview. And so now I'm going to hand it over to people who actually are experts in this. I'm just a layperson.
Thank you so much, Ramona, for that great overview. We're going to show a really cool video of Seth, and this is his inclusion story. So let's go.
Seth is pretty creative and a fun, loving kid. He is really observant.
He is so curious. He's always asking to know more about things. And then as soon as he knows something, he wants to go tell everybody what he knows.
Seth was born with Down syndrome, and he has some pretty significant needs. Our biggest struggle is wanting to be understood and wanting to be heard and wanting to be able to share, and doing that in a really good way and safe way. What I wanted was for him to be able to learn alongside friends. I wanted him to have genuine, authentic friendships and be able to really grow alongside peers. I want him to be an active part of his community, to have access to education equally. And here at McMicken, they've really created a culture of belonging that includes all students, including students with disabilities like my Seth.
Every student is welcome in every classroom. Every student participates in all activities. All students receive the support they need so that they can stay and remain in class. Every single one of our students has a different level of need, but they all have needs. And I don't think one student takes away from another student. Sometimes more students require more time at that time, but I feel that all of my students get what they need based on who they are. So while Seth may need more support or attention in one area, he's not the only one. It takes time, it takes teamwork, and it takes patience, but it works. And students will grow and develop when they have the tools and supports they need. I'm just excited to see where he will go from here. Watching him develop from kindergarten till now and seeing how far he's come. World, watch out, are you ready for Seth? Because he's coming.
All right, that was a beautiful story of Seth's inclusion. And before we move on, we do want to remind folks that we do have a Q&A section. So if you have a question, please put it in our Q&A area. It's at the bottom of your screen under the More set little menu. And then we have the chat open just for people to chit chat. So feel free to chit chat, but we might miss your question if you put it over there. So please put it in our Q&A section. Thank you. All right, and now we are moving on. Who do we have up next? I just lost my place. Okay, so next up, we're going to be hearing about inclusive education from Cassie from OSPI. And we do have Senator Trudeau is supposed to join us anytime, so we might have to hop around a little bit. So please hang with us if we need to change and pivot a little bit. So we're going to welcome Cassie. Thank you for being here with us today to talk about inclusive education.
Thank you so much. Let me get my screen set up. Is everyone seeing the slides on your screen? Great. Thank you again for having me today. My name is Cassie Martin. I am the Executive Director of Special Education at the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. I use she, her pronouns. I am a middle-aged woman. I have long, curly, kind of dark blonde hair, and I'm wearing black glasses and have a bright blue turtleneck on today. Thanks for having me. So what I'm so excited to be here today because I really get to talk about what I like talking about most, which is inclusive education. For those of you that know me, know that prior to this role, I was one of the architects of the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project. And what we have is called the Statewide Demonstration Sites Project, which highlights inclusive schools and districts across Washington state, one being McMicken Elementary, where Seth goes to school from the video we just watched. So there's lots of connections. And you will notice today that I am building off some of what Ramona spoke about this morning as well. So there's two areas of focus since I have been, oh wait, let me, quickly, oops. Let's see. I'm going to, well, let me move through here. Thanks, everyone's being patient. There are two areas of focus that I'm going to be talking about with you today. And the first is removing the special education funding cap, which is, as many of you know, it was raised last year. There was a 13.5% cap on how much money was provided for special education. And then that moved to 15%. And what we're looking to do is to remove the cap altogether to make sure that districts across the state of Washington have their special education, full funding for special education services. The second thing I'm going to talk about today are inclusionary practices. And you heard some of what Ramona talked about in terms of the Inclusionary Practices Project, which was, its inception was in 2018. And I'll talk some about the progress that we've made and kind of what are some of the sustained efforts we want to continue to make, and also about what we've learned and how we're going to take what we've learned to focus more on inclusionary outcomes and really making that transformational shift in our system. So, you know, why we want to remove the special education funding cap is first, you know, our school districts across Washington have a legal obligation. They have to, they're legally obligated to serve students with disabilities in Washington, and it does not matter how much that costs. Also, we hear from our partners all over Washington state about the ongoing concerns about meeting the needs of students who qualify for special education, especially in light of current staffing shortages and the budgets that are, so the money that is being impacted by how many students are enrolled in schools or going to schools or out of schools. And that's been a huge concern. And then finally, and really most importantly, is that this is a significant equity issue. So not every school district in Washington state has equal access to the money available kind of in their regions and neighborhoods. And what that means is that some of Washington students who are the furthest away from educational justice don't have the same opportunity and access to some of those early supports that Ramona was talking about earlier in early childhood education, in addition to having opportunities to have funding prior to referral in special education or some of those earlier services.
Cassie, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Senator Trudeau is with us at this moment. So we're gonna let her come in quick. Senator Trudeau.
Hi, everyone. If you're wrapping up, I can wait a minute or two. Otherwise, I'd be happy.
Just go ahead and
okay. I'm literally in the women's lounge off of the wings as we're starting to take votes. So just appreciate your patience as we've tried to figure out how to get me into the Zoom room on time. What is most helpful for this discussion? Would you like me to talk about my bill, or more broadly, why I'm working on the bill around burden of proof? I've been a little bit frantic. I know someone gave me a prompt, but it's been chaos.
A little bit of both things, why it's important and what's happening.
Sure. So there's probably folks on here that have heard me talk a little bit about my personal connection to these issues. And I'm sorry if you hear background noise. That's just kind of, I could only find one little quiet corner. But you know, I am a sister and a daughter to folks that have disabilities. I've navigated the IEP program. I've navigated a number of different systems on their behalf because my mother is also a limited English speaker. So really understanding where there's some challenges and touch points that impact families that don't have the same access and resources. So that's just a little bit about my background. I also was an IP, so I was a caregiver for both of them about 8 to 10 years ago, before I ended up taking my first role at the state legislature, and then been just tracking as these conversations have been elevated in the state legislature as, you know, especially after capital gains. And we were able to really have a conversation about what plans we want to have around this space, the special education space in particular. But I can talk more if people have questions, but to just kind of dovetail into why I brought the bill. And thank you to Stacy, who I know is on here because I at least saw her write something in the chat. Me and Stacy have communicated about my experiences and my passion for this work. My brother is still a student at Stadium High School. We continue to work through challenges around IEP process. And so I know that if you don't have the opportunity, the ability, and the resources to ask districts to even make the ask of them to challenge an IEP or to question whether your child is receiving the proper education that they deserve, both morally and constitutionally, that shifting this burden of proof will go a long way to ensure that at least when someone identifies there's a problem, that it's not on the parent or the caregiver to then be able to prove what that problem is. I think that the burden should be on the more resourced, right, in this space, the school district that has all of that information, that really the burden should be on to make the case that they are, in fact, you know, providing that care. But also, I think what we've seen in other states and what's been really compelling to some of my colleagues is this forces folks to come to the table faster. So when a school district knows that there's a challenge and there's potentially, you know, going to be costs and process accrued, then it forces people to the table to have that discussion and hopefully resolve things quicker, which is better actually for families and for the district. So I'll pause there. I see at least one hand up, so I'd be happy to answer questions.
Hello, John Michael Rader, I'm a single parent, paralegal second year, Spokane County. So oversight within the budget, you know, in the district and most entities, when you start going into the budgetary obligations and how that can, you know, be affected if in fact it's found they're not doing their due diligence to uphold to the CFRs that are attached to those, right, with the acts. I think that needs to be really highlighted within this process, because a lot of allocated funding is going to services through the Disability Act. And yet, where's the accountability? There's plenty of complaints, there's plenty of reports, but where is the neutral party to take action into what's being budgetally obligated? Because that upholds them, right? They can promise us parents things, you know, the world, but when it comes to brass tacks, they need to comply or else potentially lose their budget from at least with federal land.
If I'm hearing correctly, oh no, I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying is sort of the accountability, the funding contingent on them complying with my bill. Maybe we could follow up offline if I'm not understanding the question correctly, but as of right now, I don't work directly on the budget. I'm not a Ways and Means member, so I don't know if I'm in the best position to talk about that interface. I don't think I disagree at all with what you have said, if I'm understanding it correctly, but my bill is limited to what I think we think can pass in a 60-day session. There's a lot more that needs to be done. So mine is like a little tiny piece, and I understand that, and I can understand that there's broader frustrations that my bill is not going to resolve. But maybe that's a offline conversation that I'd be happy to have.
Thank you. And did you talk about the status of the bill, where we are at with it? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm really excited. We were able to get the bill out of the Senate unanimously. This is really, really great for the House. Unless there's some huge thing that I'm not aware of or Stacy's not aware of in the House, this is a really good path. I've spoken to my seatmate, the Speaker of the House, about it. She understands the reason why it's a priority. There was a bill also that was introduced in the House that was a much more comprehensive bill that included this piece, and it was introduced by a Republican. So you'll see Senator John Braun was number 2 on my bill, strong bipartisan support. So I think this is something that we get done this year. And then I think we continue to figure out the places that we still need to go. But I feel very, very good about the status of the bill. And I feel good that this is a change that will happen this year.
So
I can't control everything. So, I say that and it'll make me famous last words, but everything is set up in a way that is really, really good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time. Ivanova, did you have something?
This is Ivanova Smith, and my question, Senator, is what are ways and policies that would help close down self-contained classrooms and make it so that all students, no matter their IQ, get to have access to science, history, and any other academic courses that a long time we're still being denied if we're in a self-contained classroom. I had to fight to get access to history classes. My peers who didn't have parents who didn't have the parents that they were stuck in a self-contained classroom the whole time. They didn't get any sex education, no health education. They didn't get the same curriculum as the non-self-contained classroom students. How do we stop that from happening? Thank you.
Thank you, Ivanova. You bring up a really, really good point. I think it's a point beyond the scope of the bill. I think it's one of those things that we have to continue to work on. I'm someone that's advocated, right? So for my brother to be in more general education and not just the minutes that count towards lunch. I have been in those rooms where I've said that. I see my bill as an opportunity when a parent says, why isn't my kid able to access this? Now they can question whether, what's in the IEP and why it's not. So this allows that conversation to move forward, but this is where I'm saying it's not a solve or a solution that's going to address all the things. It's one step in just allowing for a parent or caregiver to advocate. But I know you bring up a really good point. There's not always folks that even have the ability to advocate and to recognize that that's not happening. That's a much bigger conversation that we absolutely need to have. But I'd say I completely understand what you're saying. And I think you make a very valid point that continues to keep kids from the education that they deserve. That's for sure.
Thanks so much, Senator Trudeau. We appreciate you being here, and I know your time is really limited. So we want to allow you to get back to doing your very important work. And thank you for all you're doing for our community and this really important bill. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for trusting me.
Bye. Okay, Cassie, back to you.
Okay, let's get this going again.
Thanks for letting us interrupt you.
Of course.
Could I be forward her email or contact by chance? Senator.
Okay, so it's a good actual transition from the question that, or not the question, but the statement that Ivanova made about inclusionary practices. And I do think it's really important for us to acknowledge in this space, and Ramona spoke to this a little earlier in her opening, is that this really isn't about special education necessarily. It's about transforming our larger general education system. We need to be honest with ourselves that the educational system was not designed with students with disabilities in mind in the first place. And so we have a lot of work to do to transform our larger educational system. And I'm committed to doing that. And I'm going to talk about some of the work that we're going to do to make sure that that happens. But part of what we're looking for is sustained inclusionary practices funding, which we received from the legislature, and I'll give a little bit of history about that. Similar to what Ramona said, I want to be very, very clear that inclusionary practices foster inclusive learning environments that support each and every learner. We have 80 years of research that shows that inclusive education is better. And as Ramona said, it's not just better for students who qualify for special education services, it's better for everyone. And a lot of folks have focused on the social emotional learning outcomes, which are extraordinarily important for students with disabilities and students without disabilities. But what we know now from the research is all the academic benefits for both students with and without disabilities. So it's academic benefits and social emotional benefits across the board. And so making sure that we're always kind of bringing that to the forefront is really, really important. We also know that there is, when we talk about changing the larger general education system, we talk about that because when we have more inclusive environments, it prevents the over-identification of students for special education. And what that means is that students we know can be over-identified and can qualify for special education services when really it has to do with what we call kind of that foundational, we call it tier 1 in educational terms, but those foundational supports in the general education not being in place. Or we call them multi-tiered system of supports, which is making sure that we have a variety of supports in place in general education before needing to make that referral in special education. And to be clear, all of those supports are in place for all students, regardless of whether or not they qualify for special education services. So it's really about putting our attention into making a more robust general education system that allows for good, high quality instruction, and then those supports and services to be embedded within those environments. So as we talked about, what specially designed instruction is all about, what the IEP is for students to make progress in the general curriculum. So back to Ivanova's point earlier, if they don't have access to that core curriculum in the first place, how are students supposed to make progress in the core curriculum? So something for us all to think about. So these inclusionary practices funds direct professional development, and it's really focused on student and family voice, teacher and paraprofessional training, and school and district leadership and implementation. So really what we're trying to do is look at all levels of the system and how they're interacting with one another to really build a robust, inclusive educational system across Washington. So I mentioned that I would give a little bit of background about kind of our history, and I know I have a very short amount of time, so I'll get through this. So Ramona mentioned this. She said some years ago, it was specifically in 2018, Washington was one of the 10 least inclusive states in our nation. And that was not a statistic that we were comfortable with. And so the state legislature provided funds for this multi-year project that was called the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project. And from that, we saw some really impressive gains. You can see right here some of the growth that was made, and those 100 pilot districts. Ramona referenced pilot districts before. What those pilot districts were, they were the districts in Washington state that had the least amount of inclusion. And how we did that was we looked at their data around where students with disabilities were spending their time. So these were the students that were spending the most amount of time in segregated settings, in separate educational settings, not in general education. So, we have a lot to celebrate here, because as of 2023, our schools in Washington have reported a 9-point increase, as you can see, in inclusive practices. And what that means is students with disabilities spending 80 to 100% of the school day in general education statewide, with a 20-point increase in those 100 inclusionary practices pilot sites. You can see in the yellow box how those pilot districts are catching up with those numbers statewide. And what this means is that 2018, nearly 22,000 students in kindergarten through 12th grade with disabilities across Washington have shifted to the highest tier of inclusion. And this is very, very good news. We're really excited about this progress. But we always want to look at our data more closely and our information more closely. So this is a cause for both celebration and reflection, because when we started digging in deeper to that data, to those numbers, we started to ask the questions, well, which student groups are experiencing these opportunities and which ones are not yet? And here is what we learned. We learned for Black students with disabilities, they have been and continue to be segregated and disciplined at higher rates than every single other student group. What we also noticed from our data is that students with intellectual, developmental, and behavioral disabilities continue to be segregated for all or most of the school day. So when we separated out that data and we saw those huge jumps, they were for some students, but they weren't for all students. And that also over 2/3 of preschool students with disabilities are served in segregated early childhood settings. And so again, there was that ranking 44 out of 50th that was our call to action for our Inclusionary Practices project. This data here is our call to action for our next phase of the Inclusionary Practices project, which we call the Inclusionary Practices Technical Assistance Network. And the reason why we're changing that name from the Inclusionary Practices Project, which was focused and fully kind of funded through special education, and mostly is now, it continues to be, is that we are really pairing general education and special education, trying to work across the entire educational system, recognizing that if we don't shift, if we don't transform our educational system, we're never going to make the progress we need to make sure every single student is a full participating member of the general education community. And so our aim statement, and this is our project aim that we are working towards, and all of the organizations that we're partnering with are working towards, is that the Inclusionary Practices Technical Assistance Network will provide high quality guidance. So that's the information that we provide, technical assistance. So that's the training and professional development, resources to disrupt segregated systems of disproportionality. So what we've noticed is we have disproportionate number of Black students with disabilities being segregated, and a disproportionate number of students with intellectual, developmental, and behavior related disabilities being segregated, and reduce exclusionary practices in Washington schools. And we received some feedback saying, well, shouldn't you be talking about what you want to do instead of what you don't want to do? You shouldn't talk about reducing exclusionary practices. You should talk about increasing inclusionary practices. And my response has been, if you look at our data, we are doing a really great job. I mean, we're making seismic shifts and we are increasing inclusionary practices, but we are still giving permission to exclude specific student groups, and we need to stop doing that. And until we call that out, it's going to continue. And so our goal is that these collective efforts, our efforts towards that aim, will result in improved student outcomes with an additional focus on the outcomes and the inclusion of students currently in those self-contained, so those segregated settings, which we're calling least restrictive environment 3. So those are students that spend 0 to 39% of their day in general education, and for Black students with disabilities. So Advocacy Day, as we continue to collaborate together, how we can help one another is, please ask your schools and districts in your regions about special education funding and how those decisions are made. Are those funds, do they continue to be made to reinforce exclusion or to promote inclusive education? And ask about those interventions and systems that are in place for students that are culturally affirming. So we know when those aren't in place, we see greater segregation. Share your lived experiences and ideas for ways to foster learning and belonging in schools, similar to the video we saw about Seth. As parents, families, educators, we also know that as students are separated away from the larger school community, so are our educators, and that prevents educator growth as well. And how do we support students as they transition to a post-secondary activities? That's an area where we really want to put in some concerted effort. Talk to your local representatives about fully funding special education and inclusionary practices, similar to how it was brought up just a few minutes ago, and make sure that we're continuing to have those conversations and that we are keeping an eye on those groups that we continue to provide permission to exclude. And reach out to our division, reach out to me anytime, share your stories with me, share your ideas with me, share your concerns with me, and I can commit to making sure that I elevate those to anyone, to make sure that we're prioritizing what's important to you. And remembering that inclusive education is not a project. It's a journey that we're all going to be on together, and it's something that we are going to continue working on, because as our communities shift and change, as our partners give us more information about their strengths and their needs, that our system needs to be able to transform and change. And what we're looking to do is stop kind of massaging around the edges and putting Band-Aids on, and really thinking about how we transform this larger system so it works for each and every student in Washington. And thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for that, Cassie. I appreciate you sharing with us on the PowerPoint and whatnot. It seemed like there was a lot of like questions and comments, but I was wondering, oh, wait, I see Deanna's hand up. Deanna, do you want to go?
I do, thank you. I'm wondering, Dr. Martin, if you could share how long it is taking districts to make those transitions to more inclusionary practices, and specifically in the preschool programs.
Yeah, we're seeing pretty significant growth in our preschool programs as well, but it is depending on district to district. One of the things that you can do, and I appreciate Ramona put the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project webpage, and we are transitioning to, we should be piloting within the next couple of weeks, our Inclusionary Practices Technical Assistance Network webpage, is that it varies from district to district, but we do have data out there around which districts are more engaged in the Inclusionary Practices Project work and which are less engaged. And so that's information that you can ask your district, ask, how are you engaging in these? I mean, there are, free professional development opportunities, technical assistance opportunities. And so really what we're seeing is different engagement region by region. And what we're making sure to do is, as we're collecting information about our reach and about our impact in different regions, what we're trying to do is then target specific regions to make sure that everyone has access. We do know that the Inclusionary Practices Project has extended pretty, deeply statewide, but there are some areas that haven't engaged as much as others. And initially it was more of a K-12 focused project, and now it is more focused on also early childhood and early learning. So we are shifting our focus again based on what we're learning. And so any feedback to us about what you're seeing and what you're not seeing, again, we will make sure to address that and get our partners involved in that work in your region.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, are there roadblocks that are faced where there's different funding streams coming into the preschool?
Yeah, and so we've been doing a lot of, actually, we just developed a tip sheet in collaboration with the University of Washington around braided funding. And we're really trying to get those ideas out there around how we can be more innovative in terms of our funding. So, there's barriers everywhere that we look, but there's also opportunities for innovation everywhere that we look. So what we're really trying to do is focus on those innovations and and we are very committed to increasing, and improving on inclusionary practices in early learning. We know how important that is. We know what the research tells us. We know what our youngest students need, and we know that how much that impacts the trajectory of what happens throughout the course of our educational system. So while there are barriers, it doesn't mean that there's not innovations that we can address those barriers with.
Thank you.
All right, we are running behind on time, so we have time for one more question. I believe Stephanie was next. Otherwise, if it's okay, Cassie, would it be okay if you maybe put your email in the chat too, just in case? Okay, thank you so much. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I'll be really quick. I just wanted to ask about, because after your presentation, it got me thinking about how really one of the problems is that general education teachers are ill-informed and not well-trained to welcome students with differing needs into their classrooms. So I'm just wondering about the trainings and ways that you're thinking about addressing that. And if you don't have time to answer that, that's totally fine. I might reach out. I have in the past about the inclusionary practices, whatever you're calling it. But it would be really great if I think general education teachers were better equipped to welcome and make an inclusive classroom for students with disabilities and a variety of needs.
Yes, to give the most concise, to a very complex question, the most concise answer possible, I would say yes and. So first of all, it's a very complex system that we're working in, and that's why we've transitioned to the Inclusionary Practice Technical Assistance Network, and that we're teaming. We're not just focused on special education, because we know that it really takes kind of the transformation of our larger general education system. That's what's most important. And something to really keep in mind. So yes, but what the most recent research is telling us is actually the educators that have been most resistant to inclusive education are our special educators. So we're really also working on our special educators opening up and being open to those different systems. However, it could be the resistance comes from a system that doesn't feel like it's inclusive of everyone. So that's why it really is all about the collaborative structures that exist within our communities and schools, and about everyone figuring out a way to kind of make these, make students feel like that there wasn't one program that's been built for them, but that the entire school was created with them in mind in the first place.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. We really do appreciate and value your time here, as I'm sure you are busy, very busy as well. We do have to move on because as we are behind on time, and we have other speakers speaking and presenting. But I just want to thank you again for your time, and we all appreciate you being here. And yeah, we just would thank you so much. And I think next up is Katrina Brown from Kindring. You've been waiting very patiently, and on the next topic, which is also very important, early supports for infants and toddlers. So welcome, Christina.
Thank you so much. Quick visual description. So yes, Christina Brown with Kindring. I'm the Director of Public Affairs. I love talking to this group because it's so fun to hear how big everyone is thinking. And I think it's exactly where we should be. And I really appreciate the speakers before me who oriented us in the legal and statutory basis, in addition to the moral basis for inclusion. Oh, and I forgot to give my visual description already. So I'm a white woman with dark brown hair, blue eyes. And I've got 2 rows of gold necklaces on a black sweater because I'm a millennial. And I can keep things short because I know we are short on time, because I'm just focused on one good little bill. It's HB 1916 by Representative Tana Sen. Those of you who have heard me speak before will be pretty familiar with this bill because we've been working on this policy for about 2 years. This bill represents a more pared down version of what we were working on last year. And just to give a sense of who I'm representing, I work for an early support provider at neurodevelopmental center called Kindering. We are the largest early support provider in the state. And we also have like 20 different programs for kids and families with a variety of developmental needs, disabilities, behavioral support needs, and basic needs support. But our largest program is early support. So let me talk about that real quick. So the bill that we're working on this year, HB 1916, is all about the early support for infants and toddlers system, otherwise known as ESIT. I'm sure many of you on this call are very familiar with ESIT, but just to give the quick background, ESIT is the first stage of special education in Washington state, and it is rooted in the federal IDEA Part C, so that's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So, and I always like to reiterate that because it's important for policymakers to know that it is no more optional than any other part of special ed. This is a right to which little kids with developmental delays and disabilities are owed. And so to be eligible, you can have either a formal diagnosis or you can be tested and be determined to have, I think it's like a 1.5 standard deviation developmental delay. But the core services are things like occupational therapy, physical therapy, and feeding therapy to support kids, infants and toddlers, 0 to 3 years old, in developing a wide range of skills. So it might be about learning sign language, it might be about learning to articulate words, it might be about learning to swallow food. Our biggest need actually is feeding therapy, and often families will come to us because their babies are underweight. And so then our feeding therapist will help the parents, help the kids either work with a feeding tube or learn to swallow food. So these are pretty life-changing services. In the immediate term, it helps little kids with developmental delays and disabilities express themselves and access the things that they want and need. And in some cases actually survive, like in the case of feeding therapy, but there are also long-term benefits. There are many studies that show that kids who participate in early support services have higher rates of high school graduation, higher incomes throughout their lives, etc. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. These are really important services that kids with disabilities absolutely deserve. So HB 1916 focuses on a very particular issue in the early support for infants and toddlers system. And it may seem kind of funny, but the way the law is written, and because of some administrative practices by the state, early support providers like Kindering are not actually able to bill the state for their first month of services rendered. So for example, if a child, let's say an infant enrolls in physical therapy on January 2nd, an ESIT provider is not able to bill the state for those services until February 1st. And we never make that money up throughout the year. It's not a cash flow issue. It is an absolute dollars issue. And when the state changed the monthly count day in 2021, that's when all the ESIT providers got hit really, really hard. For Kindering, it was about a 10% cut in ESIT funds, is how we experienced it. It wasn't technically a cut from the state's point of view, but that's how it hit our budgets. And we've actually been in a deficit budget ever since. And so we've heard families and ESIT providers alike talking about how critical these services are and the fact that the ESIT system is in a bit of a crisis. And so HB 1916 is actually a technical bill that would just allow for ESIT providers to bill the state for their first month of services rendered. And the way it does that is just by changing the monthly count day and clarifying that ESIT providers are able to bill the state for all children that were served in a given month. It seems very simple, but it is absolutely critical to stabilizing the early support system across the state and ensuring that infants and toddlers with developmental delays and disabilities across the state have access to high quality services. So we're not alone at all, thankfully. So, our wonderful sponsor is Representative Tana Sen again this year. This is the Department of Children, Youth, and Families' sole piece of agency request legislation, which we're very proud of and very thankful for. Our bill was funded in the governor's budget. It is supported by early support providers and families across the state. And it actually just passed out of its policy and fiscal committees, both unanimously. So that all sounds so positive. But right now, we're in rules. So right now, HB 1916 is in the House Rules Committee, and it needs to be pulled, and it needs to get a vote on the floor before the House of Origin cutoff next week, which I believe is Tuesday. And so if you're interested in getting involved, this is the step that we're in right now, and this is the push that it needs before next Tuesday, is we need to ensure that a member of the House Rules Committee pulls this bill out of rules and onto the floor. So if you're interested in getting involved at all, here are the Rules House Committee members. If you're not able to see this, I'm happy to connect with you offline. I'll put my email in the chat. But that's really all that we need. And I will say, you know, a huge thank you to so many of you on this call who have already helped this bill, you know, this year and the previous year. And if you're interested in getting involved further, like I said, feel free to contact me. And I'll stop there because I know we're almost out of time.
All right. Thank you, Christina. Thank you for all the work you're doing with Kindring, and thank you for your time today. I do see that we have a few questions. However, we do want to speed along through our program here today. Really, our speakers are here to kind of just give us a short little treat about what they're working on, and then you can follow up with them after this program if you want to go a little bit deeper. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. Please don't put it in the chat. Don't do that. Please put it in the Q&A. And then our speakers are putting their information in the chat if you want to follow up with them, okay? So we are going to move right along to our next speaker here. We have Roxana Gomez from the ACLU is going to talk to us about seclusion and restraint. So Roxana, are you all ready to go?
I'm here. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Roxana Gomez. I use she and her pronouns, and I am the Youth Policy Program Director at the ACLU of Washington. My description, I am a young Latina woman. I have short black hair. I'm wearing glasses. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and share space with you all to talk about this really important issue, which is regarding the state's use of isolation, also known as seclusion and restraint in schools. And before I jump in, I just want to acknowledge the fact that this is a very heavy subject. And you know, if you need to step away and come back to this, feel free to do so. I am happy to answer questions offline and chat with you. But it's an emotionally charged topic, and I just wanted to say that explicitly. Our coalition that includes ACLU of Washington and Disability Rights Washington, the ARC of King County, amongst many other fabulous partners, have been coalescing around an effort to stop the practice of isolation and restraint in schools. The bill that is currently before us, House Bill 1479, was introduced last year in 2023, and because we're still in the current biennium, the work continues. And I guess before I talk to the bill, about the bill, I want to talk about the problem that currently exists in the state of Washington. I think one of the things that has been really challenging is people not knowing that this currently exists, that this currently is happening across our state. So a lot of our lawmakers are starting from like the no knowledge on this practice. And then when you start to dig into it, there's confusion around isolation rooms, which is what we're talking about. Rooms that are closet sized, that are locked from the outside. Students are involuntarily put into these rooms. And you know, that's the harm that we're talking about. We're not talking about timeouts. We're not talking about sensory rooms or you know, all these other spaces where students can self-select to decompress and calm down. We are talking about what I like to, the most similar thing that I view it as is solitary confinement in our public schools, because that's what it is. So we published a report last year that did a deep dive into the current use of isolation and restraint across our state. We took OSPI data and we did some monitoring. We traveled across the state, talked to school district, talked to students that had experienced isolation and restraint, as well as parents and teachers. It was a whole thing. And unsurprisingly, and most devastatingly, the students that we unfortunately expect to experience this practice are experiencing it by far and disproportionately across our state. Students with disabilities account for 15% of the student demographic, though account for 96% of the uses of isolation and 97% of the use of restraint. So there is massive disproportionality when it comes to the use of this practice. And it's not only affecting students with disabilities, it's affecting Black students, biracial students, students that are homeless, students that are in foster care. So it's affecting students that are already the most vulnerable students in our system. And what we've noticed in the last couple of years is this narrative and this dynamic around like educators feel the need to isolate and restrain kids for safety reasons. But we have to beg the question, like, for whose safety? Because, you know, if we think about safety, we need to think about the holistic safety, the preventative safety, so that young students and young learners never get to that crisis point to begin with. There's a lot more that can be done preventative, but if we continue to train on this practice, if we continue to allow it, then we will continue to use it. So we have to stop the practice. So, and I mean, there's obviously a lot of harms that come from this practice. I don't think I need to convince any folks here on this call how harmful the use of isolation and restraint are, the injuries that come out of it every single year. So it is a devastating practice that we continue to allow in our schools. And that's what we are coalescing here around. We want to stop the practice. So back in 2023, when we first introduced the bill, we were really hoping to ban the practice altogether, ban isolation altogether. It's turned out to be a little bit more difficult than we anticipated. It is politics, unfortunately. And so we have landed in this position where the bill that is now currently alive and doing well bans isolation between the grades pre-kindergarten through 5th grade. Now, this might not seem like a lot, but based on the data that we've collected and through our monitoring, the vast majority of incidences for isolation and restraint occur between those grade levels. So it's like the youngest learners that are being subjected to these practices. So our thought process is, if we ban the practice early on, then it'll essentially phase itself out, because now these young kids are not going to be subjected to this practice. They're not going to be expected to go into these isolation cells or be restrained, and therefore the problem will self-correct. In addition to banning that practice for kindergarten through 5th grade, we're also looking to ban the use of chemical restraint, the use of mechanical restraint, which is the use of devices to restrain a child. Chemical restraint is the use of sedatives or drugs that are not prescribed to that child to essentially calm them down. And so there's many other really good things in this bill, but I think first and foremost, we are keeping and centering the people that just continue to be hurt by these practices, and those are the students. Teachers are also getting hurt too, and I just want to mention that, because we can't afford to point the finger at each other. Like, their safety is our safety and vice versa. We need to work collectively. And I guess I wanted to just share, I mentioned solitary confinement earlier. I have a background of working on juvenile justice, adult like justice issues, regards to criminal legal issues. And I can't tell you how many people have told me that they experience either juvenile incarceration, adult incarceration, but have memories of being isolated when they were kids in their schools. So this really cuts deep, and it impacts people for a very, very long time. There's a psychological component, the trauma that a young person experiences when they're being subjected to that practice, and also the young people that have to witness that, the othering that takes place in the classroom. So with the policy being, that policy in mind, we also recognize that in order for us to do this right, we need to have resources. So we're asking the legislature to ensure that paraeducators are funded and, the numbers increase in the classroom, that we have more targeted professional development and technical assistance so that more people on the ground are getting trained on how to prevent these crises to begin with in the first place. And many other good things, but this is where it's at currently in the process. The bill was moved out of House Appropriations. It has not yet been pulled from rules on the House side. So once it is pulled, then it'll go to the House floor. But I do just want to, foreshadow a little bit. I think the House has been an incredible partner to us. They've passed this bill through its many steps. The Senate is where we have issues. So if I have one call to action to you all, if you all could reach out to the Senate Education Committee and urge them on why this is such an important issue to you, we would greatly appreciate it. So I will pause there and happy to answer any questions if time permits.
I think we're still kind of behind on time a little bit, but I do appreciate you, Roxana. And also appreciate the work ACLU does. I continuously get action alerts from you guys, and the information you guys are sending out is getting to folks. So I just wanted to let you know.
I'm sorry, Taylor, but Ivan Novit has her hand up for quite some time, but I don't know if you have time to get to her or not.
Yeah, we kind of, I don't know. What do you think, Kathy? Do you think we could?
I think we need to move forward.
Okay.
You could put your questions if you want to reach out specifically to Roxana. Roxana, if you can put your email maybe in the chat box, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, we got a lot of good emails and contact info in the chat and lots of great engaging comments. But yeah, so we're gonna move on next to Sydney Krebsbach. One of my local self-advocates on her lived experience. So if you're here, Sydney, we're ready for you.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. All right, so hi everyone. My name is Sydney and I'm a self-advocate here in Spokane, Washington. And I was in special education when I was in school. My education journey started when I was 3 years old, and my parents enrolled me in a preschool for special needs kids before I was formally diagnosed with autism. After I moved to Juneau, Alaska, when I was 4, my parents enrolled me in Mendenhall Community School. When I was in elementary school, I would get pulled out of class every day to see a speech therapist, speech pathologist, and a language pathologist. Also, I had special education teachers to help me with my math, reading, and writing. When I was 9 years old, my parents hired a tutor to help me with my homework after school, which helped out a lot because she helped me from 3rd grade all the way up to 12th grade. In high school, I had an IE teacher to help me with passing the high school qualifying exam, which took 3 times to pass, but I finally passed it the 3rd time. And I was the first one in my family to graduate from high school with honors. I was prepared for life after high school. I was given resources. I tried taking college classes, but that didn't work out. In May of 2021, I moved to Spokane, Washington with my parents. Now I work for SNAP at the University of Washington, and I serve as co-chair on the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council. So all those people who helped me in school have shaped me into being the person I am today. Education is important because it helps people with IDP prepare them for the future, but also to help along the way. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sydney, for sharing your story. Thank you for being here with us today. And please do, everyone, check the chat. I know there are a lot of questions we have a lot of amazing speakers today, and we still have a little bit more on our agenda. So please reach out directly if you have a question. Sorry, my voice is trying to go away from me. So we are going to go ahead and move on to our next topic here. I'm going to call it the ARC team. The ARC team is going to come and talk to us. We're going to hear about special education, FAPE, and then we're going to hear about the bills and the budget. So I'm going to welcome the team here and pass it over to Ramona, Kathy, Stacy, our ARC team, and we're going to hear from them before we wrap it up with Sean.
Oh, Kathy, do you want me to kind of take the lead on some of the education things? Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so unfortunately, this was a week of bills that were in play that had their demise. And it's always sad when that happens because people work really, really hard on them. But we'll talk a little bit about what's left. So as Senator Trudeau said, the most exciting part is that the burden of proof made it through the Senate and is now in the House, waiting for a hearing in House Education. It's been introduced, but it's not scheduled for a hearing yet. Senator Trudeau is an amazing advocate for her bills. I'm sure she's working that bill to make sure it gets a hearing. But we may have to start asking the chair of the Education Committee to make sure and schedule that pretty soon. As Senator Trudeau said, it's a very simple bill that requires that the school district first prove its case that what it's providing for a particular student is actually working and offering them an appropriate education, as opposed to the parent proving negative that the program is not working and placing the burden of proof on them. So then we have the ESIP bill that Christina was really great about talking about. It needs to get to the floor, so we'll be working on that. The increase in the special education cap from Rep. Callan seems to be moving still. That would push the cap up to 17.25% of the total student body that are students with disabilities, and it also requires a state auditor review of the, I think just the count of students, what that looks like. And then the special ed safety net bill from Senator Braun is also moving forward. That would basically make safety net a little bit more accessible to school districts. It changes some of the rules and removes some of the barriers that school districts have suggested were there. That makes it harder for them to get reimbursed for students that have significantly higher costs. And OSPI is okay with that bill. And then I will just let Ramona cover the other ones that I haven't. Just to let you know, though, 2130 did die. That was the bill that extended FAPE to 22. And I checked in a little bit on that bill, and because the lawsuit is still going on, I think legislators decided they were going to go ahead and see what the results of that were. And so that bill is not in play any longer. And then we'll be watching for a proviso on the Inclusive Practices project that Dr. Cassie Martin talked about. That project needs ongoing funding. It was part of a big federal grant. That grant went away, and now it's up to the state to continue to fund those efforts. And pretty much every year since the federal project was over, we've been asking the legislature to continue to fuel that project at about $5 million a year. And then I'll turn it over to Ramona.
Hi, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add. I think you did a pretty good thing. I would just say, and I mentioned a little bit of this in the chat, the legislators looking at a lot of different proposals. Some of them were literally introduced to appropriations over the weekend and heard over the weekend and acted on over the weekend. So their school districts are under a lot of stress right now with finances for various reasons. And they're looking to move money into school districts. And while there is a bill, there are several bills to increase the cap, but not entirely remove it. Or moving forward, there is also a lot of bills that would just in general increase funding for basic education. Like there's a strategy around something called, it's a horrible definition called MSOC. Basically, it's all the stuff, like notebooks, pencils, just toilet paper, it's stuff. So one thing is like that, and that actually could take a lot of money away from special education. Another one is increasing funding for paraeducators, which would be great if that was in addition to special education funding, but if they get to that. So there's some of these other ones that if they fund instead, you wouldn't necessarily see an increase in the cap on special education, though you would see money going to schools in general. So depends on how you parse it. But there is a lot of discussion around that. Possibly there's rumblings that they may, there was a bill last year called 1305, and it had various things around improving IEPs, including changing evaluation timelines. I heard the sponsor of that bill maybe trying to get that one moved. It was introduced last section and it was just sitting in rules this whole time. So they may resurrect that, but making a different bill, making it just on evaluations. If that comes out, we'll know in the next few days. And then I'm around afterwards if anyone has any specific questions on 1479.
It's great.
And then
Thank
I'll just
you.
mention that there's a Senate joint motion that Senator Kaufman brought forward. And this is an interesting, just a kind of a fun little thing. The Senate and the House can both signal to Congress that they really want them to fully fund special education under IDEA. That has never been fully funded. The proposal was always for the federal government to pay up to 40% of special education costs for states. And I think it hovers around 16, 17% right now. And so there would be a big push to have the federal government provide more money to states on this topic. And the joint motion is just to say just that. Washington state supports Congress fully funding special ed. And I imagine if multiple states did that at one time, it would get some attention. At the end of the day, it would be important for all those congressional members to vote for the funding and the budget. But we all know how that's going at the national level right now. So we'll see.
Okay, and I'll just share my screen briefly. There's just a few other bills. So the education bills, we have a lot of education bills that made it through. This week was a big deal because a lot of bills died. And so there's just a few left. I'm not going to go through them all. Can you all see my screen? I make sure you can. There is the housing bill, the increasing the supply of affordable and workforce housing bill those bills are still lies because they're what is called necessary to implement the budget. There are some bills around individual providers that are still alive, making for families, members, and the employment standards there. There's some general bills around getting behavioral health to people for young adults. The Medicaid, DD Medicaid waiver prioritization bill is still alive, and that's one of our kind of bills that we're really focusing on that prioritizes who would get a waiver when there are waivers available. It had an amendment, so it's narrowed quite a bit, but it's important and it's still there. We need to work to make sure that continues to happen. This little bill about medically complex kids is still there, and it's about collaboration or coordination for those kids to make sure that, and it would bring in some additional federal match, which we think is important. So we're watching that bill. One of the bills, there's a bill we just became aware of about rapid whole genome sequencing, and it's in rules. So what you're going to notice this week, there's a whole bunch, pretty much all the bills are in rules. And so if you see these bills that are important to you, you really need to let your legislator know, or especially if your legislator is on the rules committee, let them know that we want to see this bill, because it has to get out of rules by like next Tuesday. So it's kind of a waiting game between now and then, and the push to get these bills through. Ramona and Stacy covered all the education bills. The service animal bill is still alive. It passed the Senate, so go over to the House. There's a guardianship bill that's still alive. Okay, and I'm going to let Sean share the glory on the Nothing About Us Without Us bill in a minute. And I think all these other bills. Oh, I know. The preservation of records at Lakeland Village is still alive, and we need to move that one through as well. So again, if these bills are important to you, be sure you let your legislators know, because kind of it's the deadline now to get them through and to be heard on the floor and get a vote, so they can go to the other side. If they're in the Senate, they need to go to the House. In the House, they need to go to the Senate. And I just should note that I have there are two bill tracker on the bill tracker. There's two versions of bills of interest. One lists the bills that died, and then the other one is just the bills that are still alive. So some people like to go back and see which bills are, what died and what happened and where they got left. So know that those are both on the bill tracker site today. And then Carrie. Oh.
Just very briefly, actually, I'm putting more information about substitute House Bill 1079, because I think most people don't even know what a genome is. It's basically being able to diagnose birth to one rare genetic conditions that babies are born with, allowing the healthcare system to understand what's going on with these individuals or these babies, so that they can get the services, the treatments they need.
Great. Oops, I think she froze. Okay. Let's see if she gets her computer going back while I set this up for our next part.
And then, Kathy, did you want Sean to go ahead and talk about Nothing About Us Without Us?
He's going to come back. Whoop.
Oh, he's going to come back. Okay.
Yeah, hold on. He's next after this. Let me show his story thing first. Oops. Hold on. There we go. This one first.
Hi, I'm Sean Latham, the Policy Coordinator for Self-Advocates and Leadership.
And I'm Jessica Renner from Self-Advocates and Leadership.
We want to thank everyone for taking your time out today to join us for Advocacy Days. We're here to talk to you about how to become a trusted resource for legislators on issues that affect your life. Even though your elected officials represent you, they can't do this very well if they don't know what you want. We want to encourage you to contact your legislators throughout session, but especially this week, about the issues that matter to you.
That's right. With so many topics for legislators to learn about, your knowledge of developmental disabilities helps them to do their job. You are the expert in telling your story and how it relates to decisions they are making. Here are some tips to help you make the most impact. Your time with legislators, staff, or aides is short, and your message should be too. When you communicate, sum up what the issue is and why it's important to you. Have a specific request related to a bill or budget item. Attack the problem, not the person. Follow up with a thank you. By doing this, you greatly increase your credibility and strengthen your legislative relationships. Bottom line, stick to what you know, which is your life and how the issue affects you.
Here are some ways that you can reach out to your legislators. You can email them and their legislative assistant about your priorities.
To email your legislator, visit www.leg.wa.gov. From there, click on Communicate with a Legislator or participate in a committee hearing. Then, under Communicating with a Legislator, click Send an Email. From there, you can find and choose your representative. Click on their name, fill in your contact information, and send your message.
You can contact them through the legislative hotline phone number and ask to leave a message for them. We also encourage you to request either an in-person meeting with them or a meeting over Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Please reach out to the legislative assistant of the legislator to request a meeting. You can watch the legislature at work on TVW, either on your TV, if you have the channel, or online at tvw.org. Another way you can participate is by signing up to testify at legislative hearings. For each hearing, you can sign up for the individual bills as pro, meaning you are for the bill, con, meaning you are against the bill, or other if you have concerns with the bill you generally like. Please remember before you speak at a hearing, note what bill you are testifying about, and be sure you know what the focus of the bill is.
Let me now take you through the process using the Washington State Legislative website that can be found at leg.wi.gov. On the website under the section, Let Your Voice Be Heard, click on the button that has Participate in the Committee Hearing on it. From there, under the Participating in a Community Hearing section, click on Testifying in a Committee Hearing. Next, choose if you testifying in a Senate hearing or House hearing. We all have the choice to testify in person, testify by video remotely, or we can submit written testimony or just state what our position is on the bill.
After you pick one of the options, you will be taken to the form to register. You will need to fill out your position, your name, your email, your address, your phone number, and your organization if you are representing one. It also asks you if you will testify on a panel or not. If you are testifying on a panel, it will ask you to fill in the names of the other panelists. The other box to make note of is the pronunciation box. If you want your name said right, you can sound it out in that box. Please also check the box "I'm not a robot" at the end of the form, and then it's time to hit Submit Registration. Once you submit your registration, you will receive an email from a committee staff email address. Please read this email carefully and add the meeting to your desired calendar using the links in the email. From there, make sure you are ready to testify.
Don't forget about social media. A lot of legislators have accounts on Facebook and Twitter where you can comment or watch live stream chats and virtual town halls.
It's so important to stay informed and involved. Participate in virtual advocacy days, sign up for the ARC of Washington's action alerts, get updates at arcwa.org, and follow on Facebook. Connect with local parent and self-advocate groups. For more information, check out the ARC of Washington's Hot Tips publication on our advocacy page at arcwa.org, available in English or Spanish. And remember, change is made by those who show up.
Okay, and I'm here.
Happy Advocacy Day, everyone. I hope you are having a great day today. This week, as a lot of you know, is all about getting our bills to the House and Senate floors. As we advocate for our favorite bills to get out of their house of origin, I wanted to tell you that you can visit the legislative website and see what bills are coming up for a vote on the floor. You can just go to leg.wa.gov. Once you are on that page, look for the prompt, "What's happening on the floor?" Underneath, you can click on the links for the House floor calendar and the Senate floor calendar. These links will take you to the place to see what bills are coming up for a floor vote. Please check it out. And please check out the TVW website to see the House and Senate in action at tvw.org. Yesterday, during the Allies in Advocacy Board meeting, Noah Seidel, one of our members, was able to tell us that the Nothing About Us Without Us Act was about to be voted on the House floor. So it was cool for all of us to pause the meeting and watch House Bill 1541 get passed out of the House on the TVW website. It will now move to the Senate. I believe the State Government and Elections Committee. Moving to our one-pager today, it is all about how we can make sure each student can have an inclusive education. School is a critical part of everyone's life. School helps us get ready for life. It helps us get ready to enter the workforce, and it helps us know how to build relationships. The one-pager states, research shows that when children with disabilities are meaningfully educated alongside their peers and have access to the general education curriculum, they have better outcomes. Inclusive settings set the stage for living a flourishing and meaningful life. Our country and our state must make sure all of students have the same access to a quality education and be able to study and socialize around their peers. This has to start with early education services and go through college, in my opinion. As someone who was able to be around my peers in elementary, high school, and college and have the same educational opportunities as my peers did, I can tell you it helped me for my future. We must make sure each student can flourish by providing them person-centered accommodations in all classrooms they enter. We also must stop practices like restraint and isolation that harms students in the long run and instead invest in evidence-based supports. So what are we watching for this session? 1. A funding fix for early supports for infants and toddlers. 2. Make due process in special education fair. 3. Removing the cap on special education funding. 4. Ending isolation and restraint in schools. And 5. Design, resource, and enforce inclusive learning. For more information about these and other issues, I'm going to post this week's one-pager in the chat. Also, again, please see the ARC's bills of interests for additional information.
Hold on.
Lastly, I want to encourage you to fill out our Advocacy Day survey. This helps us understand what you like and what you didn't like about Advocacy Day, so we can get better and better. You have the option of filling out the Zoom survey that you should see on the screen now, or alternatively, you can click on the links I posted in the chat. There will be an English and Spanish link. Let us know after if you need any assistance in filling out the survey. With that, I will just say thank you everyone for attending, and go advocate for your needs.
Thank you, Sean, for closing us out today. And we have, Sean has placed the chat. Wish I could take credit, but no. Sean placed in the chat the poll, so please take some time to fill that poll out. That helps the team do better and make improvements, so we can be relevant. So please take a few minutes to fill that out. You can also click on the link if you cannot access the one that's up on Zoom, and we do have it in Spanish as well. So please fill that out, and thank you all again for being here today for Advocacy Days to talk about inclusive education. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you so much for educating us and taking time to share issues with us. Taylor, did you want to say anything as well before we wrap up today, or as we're wrapping up today?
I think you kind of echo to what I would say too. Yeah, thank you to, I appreciate all the speakers. I know some of them hopped off already, but yeah, just I appreciate everyone's participation and patience today. And feel free to always reach out to us if you have questions that didn't get addressed. And I believe we're saving the chat too. I don't know, but yeah, just reach out to us. And I just also want to thank Sean and Ivanova and for including self-advocates and getting them more involved in the legislative work. It's really amazing to see. And I was very happy to see House Bill 1541 pull through, especially in such a short session with a short budget. It's amazing to see. So thank you. Proud of you, Sean, and I'm proud of Ivanova.
Sean, I work with you so many times, so many committees. You have been my champion through everything. Good job. Yes, he's right. I just got an email from Mike Steele's assistant that I know him from 20 years. She emailed me immediately and said, that bill that you just said, Taylor, went through that quickly, and it's on its way to the Senate right now. So hopefully we'll get it through this time. Yes. As I keep saying, and this is true for everyone on here, it takes a village to do what we do.
Yes, it does. And
And
we have
Tamika,
some...
I